Hello, and welcome to yet another episode of Our Own Volition, the official podcast of Volition Comics. I'm your host, Peyton Drozd Williams. If you're a returning listener, this is week 5, and I'm grateful for those of you who are sticking around. To those of you tuning in for the first time, thank you for giving us a shot and seeing what we're all about. Volition Comics is a publishing cooperative based in Austin, Texas, and we're still in the startup phase. Ramping up our social media, crossing our T's and dotting our I's on the business side of things, crowdsourcing funding, releasing some projects for the first time, and re-releasing others with new digital art. Bringing freelancers on board to help bring our vision to life, making friends along the way. Not that it has ever been, is currently, or ever will be about the money. We're not here to make a profit or get stupid rich or anything. It'd be nice if we could live off this. Maybe someday we can. But for right now, and frankly always, our priority is storytelling, empowering writers and artists and creators of all stripes and colors, lifting up forgotten experiences and perspectives, and doing right by each other, each retaining the fruit of their labor. I want to be 100% clear. We're not capitalists, or at least I, as one of the co-founders and co-owners, head writer of The Keepers, as well as of many of our other properties, am not. Whatever sway I have, as I've already had, in shaping our business model, how we engage with each other, and our work culture, I live my values and make no apologies for that. You know, I wasn't sure what to talk about today, so I asked the Volition Comics crew in the Discord server to see what topics they would suggest, and what are my thoughts on, what I settled on. This is something I've touched on a little bit in some of our shorts and reels on social media, as well as previous episodes, but never went into detail about it, is my creative process. How do I get my ideas? How do these ideas evolve and improve as I further develop the project? Before I ever write a single word of the book itself, or the comic script, or whatever, how do I know where to start? How to continue? What constitutes finishing? Well, I've stressed this a couple of times, and I'll do so again. It's all a non-linear process. It won't look the same for every project. Something I used to do a lot, and hey, I still do this from time to time, is hop on Google Images and look up actors who I think look like my characters. Like I've said before, my stories play like movies in my head, so if we're going with the movie analogy, it makes sense to cast the movie. Hey, by the same token, it also makes sense to choose a crew for the movie, like the director, for instance. I'll say, many of my projects, not all, but many, I already have Zack Snyder in mind when I begin it, and especially as I continue it. Not to say that if these projects were ever adapted to screen, it absolutely has to be him, but I'm saying that gives me and those I loop in on the development and writing process, especially if art is involved, needs to be commissioned, a sense of the tone I'm going for. Of course, irrespective of those tools, the tone is my own. The words I choose, the settings I put the characters in, my own style, I have my own thing going on. Anyway, first thing I do, hop on Google Drive, make a new document, and begin outlining from there. In writing circles, there is a debate among those who prefer to come up with a title first, and those who prefer to save that for last. There's no right or wrong here, whatever works for that writer. For me personally, I usually come up with a title very early on, right after I have a basic premise or prompt, sometimes even a full synopsis. It does happen every now and then that when I think I have a title, think it's final and locked in, and that it is ultimately changed and modified in the writing process to something more suitable. And more rarely that from the start I have a placeholder, temporary title, knowing full well that I plan to change it. So usually it stays fairly intact. Although, one notable exception to that is the subtitles to the Keepers series. The first, United Front, has been unchanged from its very first iteration back in 2018. The second volume and beyond have been changed a few times over the years as I develop the arcs more, work out kinks in the outline, collaborate with others, and bounce ideas back and forth, and just take the opportunity. Allow myself to be divinely inspired. Overcome, compelled, possessed, almost. Like I said in the last episode, when I write, it becomes bigger than me, takes on a life of its own, with me just a vessel, a channel, a conduit for the story to flow through. Not to discount or disqualify my own creativity and the hard work I do, but I do genuinely feel like the more I try to control a project and its outcome, the less I am in control, if that makes any sense. In that sense, writing is less something I do and more something that's done to me. I'm taken over, applied to, instead of me applying to it. Does that make any sense? Do any of you have a similar experience, whether it be with writing, another creative endeavor, or anything at all? But yes, once I have a title, whether it's final or I wind up changing it, I get a list of characters going. My protagonist, antagonist, supporting cast. That's where pictures of the actors come in. Then I get a list of chapters going. Depending on the structure of the project, those chapters might be divided into parts to divide the story into coherent sections. Beginning, middle, end, or exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, conclusion. Or multiple climaxes. Or a fake conclusion, where you, the reader, think things are wrapping up and calming down, only for them to ramp up again in the real conclusion. It just depends. No two projects, at least in my experience, are going to have the same flow or rhythm to how chapters and possibly parts are structured. Another thing, a project I am currently working on, but I'm keeping pretty close to the chest, how series are structured. This is something that is subject to change even when you're knee-deep in writing, even when you think the initial outline is locked in and finalized. But I find them to be more guidelines, initial skeletons, than the flesh and lifeblood of the project, which, as I've said before, takes on a life of its own. This project is started off as one singular book. As the outline reached a conclusion and I wrote, I realized, hold on a second, I can see where this is going. It became a trilogy, each with a subtitle. 3 separate books, so I kept writing. I then realized, well, hell, this is actually one cohesive story. It's a saga that is most coherent as one and the same book. Another consideration was word count, so length, the pace I was going, where I was projecting being at. But most important was plot coherence and doing right by the characters. Side note, there are so many characters, so discovering who belongs in the spotlight, as the reader would, falling in love with one, hating another's guts, rooting for certain things to happen, experiencing the stages of grief as it all begins to click, that what is about to happen is about to happen. So, the 3 books of the trilogy became Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 of one singular story. And this is the format it has remained in since, and will stay in. Beyond this initial saga, it's funny, I do have ideas for a proper sequel down the line. It also structured as 3 acts. A consideration is, what stands on its own? And what requires as a prerequisite what came before? These are some of the questions that go through my head as I make these decisions. Let's say I finish a project, or at least I think. It's happened too many times to count that I wrap up a project and think I'm done, only for my brain to conjure up last-minute ideas and having to go back to the drawing board. Sometimes, at the 11th hour, a new subplot needs to be weaved in, something that isn't working has to be removed, or a character and their arc needs to be fleshed out more. Are you ever really done? With so many false alarms, it's hard to tell. Even when you publish, you look back and think, dang, I could have done this, and this differently. This is especially the case when the release of that project is a few years in the rearview mirror and you revisit it for the first time since. To what extent, then, can you really find peace? It's an instance of you being your own worst critic. As I said, the development and writing process is nonlinear. With its depths and lows, progress and setbacks, executive decisions made, and curveballs thrown, you never know where a project is going to take you. It's a whirlwind from start to finish, either way. I've outlined or fully written quite prolifically over the years. Some projects that are going to be massive tentpoles for Volition Comics, and others that will never see the light of day again. To varying degrees of quality, of course. I've completed some from the very first semblance of a premise to publication in a few weeks. Others within a couple of years, and others from my preteen or teenage years just now about to be released. So well over a decade of development. Or rather, development hell, stuck in limbo for years, only to be revisited, revamped, relaunched, and done justice. Sometimes multiple times. Started, shelved, and restarted a few times. It just depends on the project. The creative mind is a blessing and a curse at the same time. But as I touched on in the last episode, everyone's a creator, whether you realize it or not. You can slip into obsession, writing for hours on end or sketching on hours on end, whatever the medium of your work. Or on the flip side, there can be that burnout where you don't do anything for weeks, months, even years, as I've experienced before. You have to understand, these are worlds that you spend real time in, characters you get to know, really get to know, as if they were your family or friends. Readers express feeling like this all the time, but think of it from the writer's perspective. It's not just that I shook their hand at a minimum or heard them vent in an hour-long therapy session at a maximum. No, I'm in their head. In the heads of dozens of characters at once. I'm the protagonist, I'm the antagonist, I'm the supporting cast. Their thoughts, their words. I'm the narrator, that omniscient narrator that sets the stage, weeds out the details, says, "Let there be light," or says, "Let there be darkness," and there is light or darkness. I'm also the reader, wondering what is going to happen next, struck, surprised, hurt, amazed, whatever the emotion when a twist reveals itself, when a character goes through a tumultuous or life-changing event. I can control it all, from the tip of my finger, the click of a button, each word as I wrote it. Gospel. But I'm also powerless, overcome, just a vessel. It's a situation where it's truly both at the same time. That cognitive dissonance, Schrödinger's keyboard, or in German, Schrödinger's keyboard. Thank you all again for tuning in this week. I'm so grateful that you guys are choosing to spend a few minutes of your spare time with me and whenever I have to say. In the meantime, as we're gearing up the business side of things and prepare to release a multitude of projects, you don't have to wait to dive into what Volition Comics has to offer. Issue 1 of Wingspan's comic adaptation is out on Webtoon now, and the ebook of The Keeper's United Front is available on Smashwords, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, Apple, and other vendors. The entire first volume of Aidan Glover's Kawaii Zombie, which tells the story of Hiromi, the most popular and adored daughter of Pandora's Creek, as she navigates the fine line between human and monster, is also available on Webtoon. It was our first release back in 2022, when we were still known as Ultralight Comics. I definitely want to have Aidan back on the show to dive into that world. You can also head to volitioncomics.com to learn more about both the Keepers and Kawaii Zombie, their characters, and the worlds they occupy. We're increasingly active on social media, especially Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, so give us a follow there. And last but certainly not least, please smash the like button and hit subscribe to support the show. Thank you all again, and I'll see you guys next week.